Hey guys, tonight we're traveling through candlelit alleys and moonlit courtyard to a place where history never really sleeps. The Ottoman Coffee House. The year is somewhere around the mid-1600s. The empire's heartbeat steady but restless, and the smell of roasted beans floats through the night air like a promise. You can almost taste the sweetness of sugar melting into the thick brew. Hear the hiss of water on copper. Feel the cobblestones cool beneath your sandals. You probably won't survive this night, at least not without needing a refill. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where the night finds you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on a narrow street near the Grand Bazaar. Lanterns swing gently above, throwing patches of gold and shadow across the stones. The call to prayer has long faded. Now only the distant clatter of hooves and the low murmur of voices remain. Someone's laughing from a nearby shop. Another sings quietly to himself while closing shutters. And there it is, that aroma, the unmistakable pull of roasted coffee beans meeting hot water. The Ottomans didn't invent coffee. The beans traveled north from Yemen, but they perfected the ritual. The first cafes in Istanbul appeared in the 1550s, quickly becoming the empire's social pulse. Imagine that, one tiny cup binding together soldiers, scholars, and sailors. Historians still argue whether the very first shop opened near Tatakali or across the Golden Horn in Galata, but everyone agrees it spread faster than gossip about the Sultan's next marriage. As you walk, the city feels alive in its stillness. Smoke rises from small chimneys, blending with the damp smell of the Bosphorus. A cat slips between your legs. Istanbul's eternal citizens, the furry witnesses of empires. The moon rests above the minarets, thin and bright, as if someone carved it from silver leaf. A soft hum of a knee flute floats through an open door. The melody beckons. You follow it, feeling the warmth ahead. The door creaks as you push it open. Inside, the air glows amber from oil lamps, hanging like small suns. Low tables are scattered around. Men in turbans lean close over cups, and the faint rhythm of conversation fills the space. You take a seat near the corner, the wood polished, smooth from centuries of elbows and spilled secrets. This is a kahvehane, a coffee house, but not just a place for caffeine. It's a theater, a debating hall, a second home. Coffee here isn't merely drunk, it's performed. The master brewer, or kavichi, works with ritual precision. A small brass pot called a sesve, fine powder ground beans, water, sugar, and a slow flame. He stirs with almost religious patience, letting the foam rise and settle before pouring it into cups that look too delicate for mortal hands. A man beside you whispers a joke about the governor's new tax. Another leans in, pretending to cough, but he's actually passing a note, folded, sealed, and secret. There's laughter from the other side of the room as a storyteller begins his tale, his voice rising like smoke. Mainstream history tells us these cafes were places of leisure, but the truth runs deeper. They were engines of communication, echo chambers of the empire. Letters could be read aloud here before reaching official couriers. Some say the entire rumor of Sultan Murad's latest campaign first brewed right above a boiling sesve. Historians still argue whether this makes the Ottoman coffee house the ancestor of the modern newsroom. You sip your cup. It's bitter, earthy, and strong enough to make your heartbeat dance. The warmth travels down your throat and settles in your chest, steadying you. Someone chuckles about a man who tried to mix coffee with goat's milk and fainted. Not because of the experiment, but because his wife saw the price of the milk. That's joke number one. Don't worry, two more are waiting later. You look around. walls painted in deep ochre, patterns curling like smoke. The floor hums faintly with each footstep, the sound of history still moving. You're leaning back now, the night fully stretched. The coffeehouse buzzes. A man slaps the table with excitement. Not anger, just politics. You realize you're sitting at the epicenter of empire-wide gossip. Here, words are power. The Ottomans governed through layers, viziers, pashas, clerks. But in places like this, the people debate every decision. One scholar claims coffee keeps minds alert for divine study. Another insists it leads to idle rebellion. Historians still argue whether these conversations were tolerated or quietly watched by the Sultan's spies. Someone unfolds a map of the Balkans, tracing with a wet finger the frontiers where battles smolder. The table grows quiet. You sense tension and caffeine working together. Not always a healthy mix. Yet in this dim room, the empire breathes. Fact: Sultan Murad IV once banned coffee, alcohol, and tobacco, declaring them distractions from prayer and discipline. Quirky tidbit: he used to patrol the streets in disguise, catching rule breakers himself. Imagine the ruler of half the known world pretending to be a night guard, peeking through doors like a nosy neighbor. You probably wouldn't survive that inspection either. Still, even bans couldn't quench the thirst. Within days, new cafes reopened under names like bookshops or soup kitchens. You can almost hear the sarcasm dripping from their painted signs. A young poet recites a verse about love and beans. Both burn when ignored. The crowd chuckles. You smile. History is full of these small, ridiculous truths. Your cup empties again. The brewer refills it silently, his hand steady despite the noise. Steam curls upward, catching lamplight. Outside, a dog barks twice, as if confirming the argument inside. The Sultan's displeasure is more than rumor now. It's law. Decrees hang like smoke in the air. You can feel the unease settle over the tables. Yet the door still opens, the sezve still boils, and the whispers grow softer but sharper. You notice a man in official robes near the entrance. He doesn't drink, he watches. His eyes linger too long on each speaker. Someone jokes that spies must drink their coffee cold. Easier to swallow lies that way. Nervous laughter follows, but no one stops talking. Historians still argue whether Murad IV's surveillance was efficient or symbolic, but it certainly didn't stop the flow of information. People crave stories, and here, truth and fiction swirl like sugar at the bottom of the cup. Fact: in 1633, a great fire swept through Istanbul. Many said it was divine punishment for sinful habits. Others claimed it started in a coffeehouse's chimney. Either way, when the city rebuilt, so did the cafes. The Kavesi hums a tune as he cleans his cups. The rhythm feels ancient, older than any empire. A man in a dark cloak slips you a folded scrap of paper. A verse, maybe a code. It reads, "Boil what cannot be silenced." Outside, thunder rolls over the Bosphorus. The lamps flicker, casting the room in trembling gold. You realize the coffeehouse isn't just surviving bans, it's thriving on defiance. The rain starts. Inside, the sound only deepens the mood. Two musicians unpack instruments. One plucks a saz, another taps a small drum with his fingertips. The rhythm finds you. Then comes the poet. Robe flowing, beard glistening from the rain. He clears his throat and begins. The words are slow, winding, mystical. "The heart," he says, "is a cup. Fill it, and you'll overflow. Leave it empty, and you'll echo forever." You realize you're in the middle of a cultural crossroads. The mystics, the Sufis, the comedians, the tired merchants, all sharing the same smoky air. Puppet players prepare their stage. Two tiny figures made of camel hide. One wears a tall hat, the other a mischievous grin. The play begins. Jokes about politics thinly veiled as comedy. Everyone laughs, maybe too loudly. Fact, shadow plays like Karagos and Hasivat became staples of Ottoman nightlife. They mocked hypocrisy, power, and love in equal measure. Quirky tidbit. The puppeteer often hid behind a curtain of painted glass, lit by candlelight, sweating while making his audience forget he existed. Historians still argue whether these performances were subversive acts or just harmless fun, but you can sense the pulse of rebellion in the applause. Your coffee is now lukewarm, but you don't mind. The music softens, and the poet's final verse fades into the drum's heartbeat. The sound of games takes over as the night stretches deeper. Wooden dice click against the table. Backgammon pieces slide like whispered secrets. Someone calls for tea, another for more coffee. Irony lost on no one. You join a table. The man opposite you wears a ring shaped like a lion. Luck, he says, is a guest. Never trusted to stay. You nod, not sure if he's talking about the dice or life. Fact. Ottoman coffee houses were centers for board games. Backgammon, chess, mancala, games older than the empire itself. Quirky tidbit. A few rulers tried to ban backgammon, claiming it distracted men from prayer, but the ban lasted shorter than a sugar cube in hot water. Historians still argue whether these games trained strategic minds for governance or merely offered escape from reality. Either way, strategy feels deliciously safe when your biggest risk is a lost coin. Laughter rises from the far end. Someone tells a riddle. What drinks you awake but lets you dream? The answer, of course, is coffee. The man bows theatrically, earning applause. That's joke number 2. Subtle but deserved. You realize the line between pleasure and philosophy blurs here. Every move on the board becomes metaphor, every sip a small defiance of time itself. The scent shifts. Cinnamon, cardamom, maybe clove. Merchants have entered, bringing spice tales from Cairo and silk whispers from Venice. The air becomes a market of stories. A sailor describes a storm near Alexandria. Another boasts of trading mirrors to Persia. So they can admire their poetry, he says with a grin. You imagine maps spreading wider with every sip poured. Fact, by the 17th century, Ottoman coffee houses were hubs of global exchange. News from Mecca could reach Vienna faster through gossip than through couriers. Quirky tidbit, some merchants use coffee foam to predict fortunes, like reading tea leaves, but with more caffeine and less patience. Historians still argue whether this crosstalk helped shape the empire's diplomacy or merely filled nights with exaggerated tales. A man beside you unfolds a velvet pouch, revealing a few nutmegs, worth nearly gold. He tosses one to the brewer, who grates it into the pot. The room smells suddenly like paradise pretending to be mortal. You breathe it in, realizing you're inhaling half the world's trade routes. It's late, or maybe early. The line blurs, as always. You notice a corner where women sit behind carved screens, their laughter like bells hidden in silk. Officially, coffee houses are for men, but rules melt in the right company. One poet slips a note through the lattice, a verse, a dare, or both. A giggle answers. That's joke number 3. Love always finds its loophole. Fact, though women had their own private salons, some bold ones attended these gatherings in disguise. Quirky tidbit. A few cafes in Galata even catered specifically to mixed crowds. Scandalous, thrilling, unforgettable. Historians still argue whether these moments marked early social reform or just flirtatious exceptions. But you sense something quietly revolutionary brewing alongside the coffee. Equality, curiosity, the right to simply be seen. A breeze slips through the doorway, flickering the lamps. Someone hums a lullaby, soft and old. The night exhales. You stretch your fingers around your cup one last time, feeling its warmth fade like a heartbeat settling after laughter. Outside, the rain has stopped. The cobblestones gleam under the moon, and the city seems to listen. The talk around you turns sharper, the laughter shorter. Pamphlets pass hand to hand, folded like contraband butterflies. The scent of ink mingles with roasted beans, a perfume of revolution. Someone reads aloud from a scrap about taxes, another about trade monopolies. The room hums. Fact, by the late 17th century, Istanbul's coffee houses became informal newsrooms, where handwritten broadsheets, the Suret-i Havadis, circulated long before printing presses were legal. Quirky tidbit, certain brewers slip messages beneath saucers for trusted patrons, a caffeine-powered postal service. Historians still argue whether these cafes sowed the roots of constitutional reform or merely vented the city's frustrations. But tonight, under low lamps, every word feels dangerous and delicious. You sip slowly, pretending disinterest, though your pulse betrays you. The man beside you whispers, "The ink is stronger than the sword, but don't tell the Janissaries." That earns a hush, then a grin. The Kavesi stirs another pot as if nothing happened, his spoon keeping rhythm with the empire's heartbeat. Steam coils upward, forming ghostly letters you can almost read. Change. The door swings open. A stranger steps in, pale from travel, coat smelling of rain and distance. He bows awkwardly, orders coffee, without sand if possible. Laughter ripples. No one brews without sand here. He's a merchant from Vienna, notebook bulging with sketches and notes. You realize you're witnessing export history in real time. Fact, around 1683, after the failed Ottoman siege of Vienna, leftover sacks of coffee inspired Europe's first cafes. Quirky tidbit, one of the early Viennese sellers sweetened his brew with honey and milk because he thought the Turkish version looked like mud. Historians still argue whether European cafes copied or reimagined Ottoman ones. You, however, can see the truth in the man's wide eyes. He's falling under the same spell. He scribbles furiously, brass pots, bubbling foam, murmured poetry. They speak as if news were music, he says. You nod. Soon his sketches will travel home, and Europe will claim discovery of something the East perfected centuries ago. Outside, thunder has ceased. Inside, civilization quietly changes hands, one cup at a time. Dawn approaches, yet no one leaves. The lamps burn low, shadows taller now. A man in white robes sits beside you, a dervish. His eyes reflect the dying light like twin coals. He smiles. Coffee, he says softly, keeps the heart awake when the soul would drift. Then he tells you he drinks it through the night to stay alert in prayer. Fact, Sufi mystics use coffee during dhikr, night-long meditations seeking divine presence. Quirky tidbit, one 16th century sheikh reportedly claimed a sip of coffee let him hear angels tuning their instruments. Historians still argue whether caffeine fueled genuine spirituality or just kept eyelids from collapsing. Yet the serenity around this man feels real. His voice lowers to a chant. Others join, humming with the vibration of centuries. The smell of cardamom thickens. Your mind quiets. You're no longer visitor or historian, just another sleepless soul in the empire's heartbeat, floating on steam and prayer. As daylight leaks through the lattice, you notice the art. The cups, tulip-shaped, painted with gold tendrils. The trays, hammered brass, glinting like sunrise caught in metal. Fact, Ottoman artisans elevated every utensil to ornament. Quirky tidbit, wealthy patrons sometimes commissioned cups so thin they'd crack if the coffee cooled. Luxury with a built-in timer. Historians still argue whether these designs were symbols of devotion or displays of vanity. Either way, you're mesmerized. Each swirl of calligraphy reads like a whispered blessing. The foam at the rim forms patterns that vanish before you can name them, like thoughts in half sleep. The Kavashi wipes a spill with a flourish worthy of court dancers. Someone teases him. You clean like a poet. He bows deeply, claiming, every stain is a metaphor. The room erupts with sleepy laughter. You realize even fatigue here has artistry. The coffee cools, but the beauty remains hot. Your pulse matches the tick of cups meeting saucers. Maybe it's the caffeine, or maybe it's history racing beneath your ribs. Fact, by the 18th century, Istanbul boasted hundreds of coffee houses. Some were open 24 hours, serving sailors, soldiers, and scholars alike. Quirky tidbit, chroniclers joke that more decisions are brewed in coffee than in council. Historians still argue whether this culture strengthened unity or bred dissent, but the hum tonight feels neither political nor peaceful, just alive. A man sighs, too much coffee and you dream while awake. Another replies, better than sleeping through the empire. That's your bonus joke number 4, free of charge. You sense morning pressing at the shutters. Somewhere, a muezzin clears his throat, ready to sing the world awake. Inside, nobody moves. The rebellion of staying up a little longer feels sacred. The first call to prayer spills through the city, silver and slow. Steam drifts upward like surrender. You step outside. The air tastes new, washed clean by night rain. Domes catch light, their edges glowing rose gold. Seagulls wheel above the Bosphorus, crying for breakfast. You glance back through the doorway, the lamps extinguished, the tables empty except one man, dozing against the wall, smile still on his lips. Fact, at sunrise, cafes often doubled as breakfast stalls, serving bread, olives, and inevitably more coffee. Quirky tidbit, the earliest morning customers were usually janissaries finishing night patrols, known to tip in poems instead of coins. Historians still argue whether dawn truly ended the nightlife or merely paused it. You suspect the latter. The scent of grounds clings to your hands like memory itself. You walk toward the Golden Horn, the sky widening, the empire yawning into day. Centuries blur. You blink. The minarets dissolve into glass towers, and the hum of conversation turns to espresso machines. You're back in modern Istanbul, neon reflecting on wet pavement. Yet when you enter a small cafe in Beyoğlu, something feels familiar. The warmth, the murmur, the shared stillness between strangers. The barista grins. Double shot? He asks. You nod, thinking of the Kaveshi's copper pot. Fact, Turkey remains among the world's most devoted coffee cultures. Quirky tidbit, UNESCO lists Turkish coffee culture and tradition as intangible heritage of humanity. Historians still argue whether today's cafes preserve or dilute the old spirit. You taste and decide it doesn't matter. The essence endures. Each cup still holds the same quiet rebellion. Wakefulness, connection, story. Outside, the Bosphorus ferries shimmer. You raise your cup in a silent toast to every sleepless soul who ever whispered beneath Ottoman lamps. And now the city softens. The streets grow hushed again, as if the centuries themselves exhale. The coffee in your hands has cooled, its surface mirroring faint morning clouds. You breathe slower. The air tastes faintly of cardamom and sea salt. Footsteps fade into the distance, replaced by gulls gliding above water that looks like silk stretched thin. The hum of the past lingers, then dissolves into something weightless. Maybe peace, maybe caffeine finally letting go. You picture that first door you opened hours ago, the lamps inside, the low laughter, all still there, somewhere in time, steeped into the walls of Istanbul. Every modern cafe hums the same note beneath its chatter. Every cup poured tonight is a tiny echo of that ancient defiance, of people who refused to sleep when stories were still being told. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the rhythm slow until the only movement is breath, steady and warm. The empire sleeps now. The city sleeps. And maybe and finally, you can too. Good night, traveler. Sweet dreams.